Today on Go Ahead Ask, are you in the middle of a 1031 exchange and trying to decide what to invest in? Asking questions like, what type of real estate should I invest in? What city, what state should I invest in? What asset classes are performing better or not? Well, let's unravel that mystery today on Go Ahead Ask.
Building wealth in real estate? Let the Exeter Group take the mystery out of how it's done on Go Ahead Ask.
Welcome to the Go Ahead and Ask podcast by the Exeter Group, where we unravel the mystery of real estate. Today, our objective is to provide investors with better quality information so that you can make better informed investment decisions. Your hosts today are myself, Bill Exeter, CEO and President of Exeter 1031 Exchange Services, and Lauren Spidell, Regional Manager with Exeter 1031 Exchange Services. The Exeter Group of companies include Exeter 1031 Exchange Services that serves as a qualified intermediary for all types of 1031 exchanges in all 50 states. It also includes Exeter Trust Company that serves as an IRA custodian for self-directed IRAs, as trustee for title holding trust or land trusts, as escrow agent for specialty holding escrows, and as custodian for general custody services. On Go Ahead Ask, we always encourage questions, so feel free to email your questions or topics you'd like us to cover, or if you'd like to appear on Go Ahead Ask, to ask@exeterco.com or call us at area code 619-239-3091. Again, that's 619-239-3091. If you love Go Ahead Ask, please like it, subscribe to it, share it, or even comment on it. We do track it and we'll respond to your comments or questions. Today on Go Ahead Ask, we're going to be talking about unraveling the mystery of commercial real estate in Illinois and beyond. Some of the most frequent questions we get from clients and investors is, what should I reinvest in? What type of real estate should I buy? What geographic area should I focus on? What type of real estate is performing better and what's not performing better? We're going to unravel that mystery today on Go Ahead Ask. And today I'm really happy and excited to have a special guest with us. His expertise is not only on commercial real estate, but also on Delaware Statutory Trusts. So today with us is Alex Ruggieri, and Alex is a licensed real estate broker with SVN Ramshaw Real Estate. He's also a registered representative with broker-dealer Next Trend Securities. He's recognized as a leading senior real estate advisor. He's an author and speaker. He's a community connector, also a good personal friend. And although we haven't done this together, we're both scuba divers. So one of these days, we're going to have to do a little scuba diving together. So with that, let's go ahead and unravel the mystery of commercial real estate in Illinois and beyond. And Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a lot of fun to be here with you, even though it's virtually. And I know you mentioned the scuba diving thing. We still have yet to do the Shark Tank at Las Vegas, so we're going to have to do that.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to be back in person soon, and it's time to blow some bubbles together, and that Shark Tank is calling our name.
Amen.
So what else do you think the listeners would want to know about you personally?
Oh, gee whiz. Well, I've been involved in real estate for, it's sad to say, almost 45 years. I literally bought my first house before I was even 21. I got licensed at age 21 back in the day. And, had my own real estate company for years, and then currently a partner in our firm, SVN Ramshaw Real Estate. Been involved with the SVN International Group now for 15 years. Top salesperson with them. They have a thing called Partnership Circle Award. It's kind of like the top 10 out of, I think they have 1,900 agents worldwide. And I've been there like 7 times in Partnership Circle. I'm always in the top 50 out of the 1,900 people anyway. And so very involved in commercial real estate. But I mean, personally, I live out in the country in East Central Illinois. I'm on 10 acres out here. We had a big garden, and we just really enjoy the country life and the quietness of it. And then, of course, we work all over in our business all over the country. So I'm licensed in Illinois, and I collaborate with other licensees in other states. So we do some volume in commercial real estate. It's a lot of fun.
While you're licensed in Illinois, what specific sectors do you cover? Do you ever go outside of Illinois? Did your firm clearly is international, but specifically what areas and sectors do you consider yourself an expert in?
I don't like using the word expert because there's always somebody out there who's smarter than you are in a given area, but I've spent a lot of time in the multifamily space. I've worked a lot with assembly of land for developers. You can literally go through our town, and I can point to $500 million with a B of projects that I've brought to town where I've encouraged people to invest either in our market or on the campus of the University of Illinois, and they've built $40-50 million projects. There's one that just recently sold for over 100 million that I brought to town about 7-8 years ago. And so that's one area that I feel comfortable in is multifamily and land assembly, putting that together for developers. The other thing I really enjoy doing is industrial, office and industrial. But we have retail listings. I have shopping centers that we have for sale and representing ownership on. I have done farm sales, but mostly, like I work with foundations and not-for-profits when their farms are in the path of growth and that kind of a thing. I don't represent myself as a farm broker, but usually can get higher than farmland prices for people that have land that might be suitable for development, because that's my connection. I work more in the commercial real estate field, and I can help people, identify those opportunities. So, we're down here in East Central Illinois, and it's about 100,000 people, and so you really have to wear more than one hat here in commercial real estate. But the thing that I like the best is the multifamily, and then the industrial, the office and industrial.
That's great. Are there any specific asset classes or geographic areas where you are seeing the most growth?
Well, I mean, I think I travel all over the country. Other than say the COVID with uh, the restrictions we had there. Which thankfully are lifting now. But usually I go to 6 or 8 conferences a year, and they're spaced all over the United States. And those are investor conferences where people go to share real estate opportunities and to see real estate opportunities and that kind of a thing. In fact, that's where I met Bill, was way back in the day, at one of those conferences many, many years ago. And so I have the opportunity of having a really good pulse on what's going on in the country and that kind of a thing. For instance, I was talking to one of my contacts yesterday. They do a lot of development work with travel centers and that kind of a thing. And there's a real strong market for that on the East Coast. And there's people that are planning, in Ohio and in other areas up and down the Eastern Seaboard of building, 50 new travel centers in the next 5 years. That's like 10 a year. And that's just one client that he's working with. Whereas, I heard on the news just the other day that certain towns in California are prohibiting new gas stations and travel centers from ever being built in their communities. So you can say, if you're in that little market, niche, you're going to want to look at some of these areas on the Eastern Seaboard as opposed to going out west. But that's just a small example. But you go down to Austin, Texas, is just like smoking hot right now for development, for corporate relocations, and for housing and that kind of a thing. There's just a lot. Florida is really strong right now for multifamily. It just depends on what market niche you're in and what area of the country is really responding well in that market.
Are there any asset classes or areas that are underperforming? For example, I know that I have clients who, in the beginning of last year, invested in hotels and they invested into student housing. Those are areas that, just because of how our world has changed so much since last year, has really been affected. What are you currently seeing? As you mentioned, restrictions are easing. People are starting to travel more. Are there any specific areas that, I wouldn't say you'd stay away from, but that you are seeing underperform, whether that be in Illinois or outside of Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned two that are probably the most directly affected, and then also there's retail, which has really been affected. I mean, we have a outlet mall not far from us here on the exit at the highway, 268,000 square feet, and was already starting to erode. Some of their stores were leaving when we went into COVID. They were about 65% leased. Today they are 33% leased, and that's how much has changed in the last year. So certain retail assets are really suffering. I think neighborhood retail, where you go to the dry cleaners or pick up a pizza, maybe an international grocery store, those kinds of things, the laundromat, those kinds of things are probably always going to fare well, those neighborhood centers, because those are kind of Amazon proof. You're not going to buy a pizza from Amazon, right? Or take your cleaning to Amazon. Or go buy a pack of tortillas at the Amazon International Grocery Store. You're going to go to your neighborhood store, and I think those uh, little retail centers are probably going to do well. But hotels really got hit hard. Student housing got hit, but I'll tell you, I do a lot with some of those developers all over the country, and we had put a property under contract for about $6 million over in Ohio, working with an Ohio broker, boots on the ground over there. And at the time, then COVID hit. And we were like, oh my goodness, we just got this put together. They were planning a student housing project. What is going to happen? We got them on the phone. This is 6-7 months ago. We got them on the phone and we said, hey, how do you feel about this in light of COVID and everything? And their response was, we're not worried about it in the least. It's going to take us a year to get our entitlements in place and get our building permit. And it's going to take us another year to build the thing. By then, we're going to be out of that. And oh, by the way, our feedback is, and our belief, our strong belief is that parents are going to want purpose-built, brand new student housing for their kids, as opposed to whatever, sharing, roommating it with somebody or being stuck in a dorm somewhere that's 30 years old. And so we think we can charge more rent because we can charge a premium because we're going to have a higher quality product. So they didn't back out, and they're moving full steam ahead. In fact, just the other day they said, hey, you got any other properties in Ohio State that we can build? So some people, I think, it just depends on the campus, just depends on the situation with regard to student housing. So that's kind of hit and miss, because some people are still really strong on student housing. Other areas that have done really well, self-storage just really has gotten a lot of interest and activity.
Well, certainly with all the challenges out there and whatnot, especially when you're selling real estate or buying real estate, you're doing a 1031 exchange. There's a lot of moving parts there. And you brought up a good point, which is how you and I met way back when with some of these marketing groups. So the Society of Exchange Counselors, the National Council of Exchangors. And I think one of the things that really positions you well is really your role as a counselor and an advisor. Clients and investors come up with all sorts of issues during COVID-19 times and things like that. And maybe discuss how you can kind of help creatively solve some of those issues when the client gets a roadblock thrown up in front of them.
I am a member of the Society of Exchange Counselors. I'm a member of the National Council of Exchangers. I'm past president of the NCE and have spent many years on the board of governors of the Society of Exchange Counselors. But one thing that I am that many people don't have or don't understand is I am also a CRE. And very few people have ever heard that, but the CRE it's a designation offered through the National Association of Realtors. It is the highest designation you can earn through them, and you can't get it by taking a test, taking a course, paying a fee, or anything like that. It is only given to somebody who has, after they've demonstrated decades and decades of service to the industry, and then you are invited in, a lot like SEC. It's invitation only. And then, but what's different with this is then you have a 4-hour interview that you have to do downtown Chicago at the where I went and did my interview anyway was at the headquarters of NAR and Michigan Avenue. And then you have to submit a portfolio of all your work. And anyway, and then you get to be a counselor. And the whole point about counselors is that we try to work with people by finding out what their goals and objectives are, and then counseling with them on ways to how to get there. And a lot of times, people don't understand that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And that's especially true when it comes to real estate.
And along the same lines, you get some of these 1031 exchanges, you've got 45 days to identify. That moves very quickly. And I know that you are a registered representative and can also represent the Delaware Statutory Trusts. So maybe go into a little details on how that can help an investor, especially when they're butting up against that 45-day deadline.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Well, that's true. I'm a registered rep with Next Trend Securities. And the thing that's attracted me to getting my securities license and working with Next Trend is the fact that Next Trend does only DSTs. That's all they do. They don't sell stocks, they don't sell bonds, they don't sell insurance, they don't do any of that stuff. For me, that is a very important tool that my customers and clients can tap into when they need help doing a 1031. I'll give you a couple of really good examples. The thing about the Delaware Statutory Trust, if people haven't heard of that or what it is a beneficial ownership in real estate that allows you to buy a fractional interest in the real estate and yet have all the benefits of the real estate flow through. So your cash flow is going to flow through to you, your depreciation is going to flow through to you, and it does qualify for 1031 tax deferred exchange treatment. And in the end, if you were to pass and this on to your heirs, it actually enjoys the stepped up basis that any other real estate would when they inherit that. So a lot of benefits to it. There are, things that aren't so good about it. It depends on, what your personal situation is. So there's no one perfect fit for all people, but it does offer a lot in the way of benefits. And I like to point out a couple when it comes to 1031. For one thing, if you're putting together a 1031, let's say, for instance, you just sold a $5 million property, and the property that you want to trade into is a $4 million property, just to make the numbers round. Well, normally you would have an issue there because you could certainly do the exchange. But if you follow all the IRS rules and guidelines, you're going to end up paying tax on that additional $1 million, or the additional gain would be taxed at that point. So that's where a DST can come in real handy, because you can say, well, I really, really want this $4 million asset. It's just exactly what I wish it was $5 million to make it easier, but I'm not going to overpay for it just to save on the tax. but I'll go ahead and buy that, and I'll buy a DST, or I'll identify a DST. I'll trade into my $4 million property, and I'll be so happy. But then I'll also have a DST that allows for all the other similar 1031 benefits. So that's a really good way to use it. And I call it to cover your boot. So a DST can cover your boot really, really well. Another thing that I think is really helpful is like, for instance, in the case of, our good friend Dan Wagner from Inland Real Estate, and he told me the story about a guy that came up to him one time and said, "Gee, I wish I'd have known about DSTs sooner." And he says, "Well, why is that?" And he goes, "Well, I lost my best friend." He goes, "What do you mean you lost your best friend? Did he die or something?" He goes, "No, no, no. He never talks to me anymore." "Well, what happened?" "Well, he had a situation where we sold a big ranch of his, and we were going to do a 1031 into another ranch. And he identified that property, and everything was all hunky dory and everything. And after the identification period expired, the whole transaction blew up, and we didn't have anything else identified. Had we taken the precaution of identifying a DST as insurance, at a minimum, my guy would have been able to avoid the $900,000 tax bill that he got when his 1031 blew up, and he wasn't able to effect his exchange. And maybe my best friend would still be my best friend, and he'd still be talking to me. So the second way you can use a DST as a backup, or what I say insurance policy, if you will, so that if anything happens to your main property or your second property, you at least can back up and use the DST to exchange and affect your exchange, and not have to pay the tax at that point in time. There's a lot of other ways to use it, but those are two ways that act really as excellent tools for management of your 1031.
I like the cover your boot slogan. It's a good one. I haven't heard that before. So I know we talked about a lot of different trends in different sectors that are doing well and some that are underperforming, but are there any other trends that you're seeing overall in the real estate industry from the beginning of last year to now? I mean, internally we've seen, of course, interest rates drop. We've talked to clients about, lending and the requirements being a little bit more stringent. What other things are you seeing in your position?
Well, there's just a lot that is happening, and I think it's kind of like history. You really don't know what history is going to say about you until 10, 20 years later, right? So how will history judge George Bush? How will history judge Barack Obama? How will history judge Donald Trump? We all know what we think right now, but until you have the perspective of looking back, say 50 years from now, it's going to be interesting how history judges things. And I think that's where we're at here. We're kind of going through this phase now, and it's kind of like, well, what will, we know things are going to change. What will they change? Now, some things that I have observed is there is a real trend in office away from the tall buildings with elevators where everybody herds in and they all cram into the elevator and go up. And I know certainly in Chicago, like for instance, downtown Chicago is having some problems with, maybe flight to the suburbs. And, the people working from home have discovered, hey, we can do this from home. But other cities, I think, are still going to come back pretty strong. Mostly those that are, in the warmer climates, like Atlanta and some areas like that, down in Texas, and some of the areas like Phoenix is just smoking hot right now. But one trend that this co-working trend, where people leave their office building. They do some work from home, but they can't do all their work from home. So they just want to have an office in a building where they can go. And I'll give you an example. We bought a building, 11,000 square foot building, well before COVID. And the idea was we were going to renovate it into a co-working building where we would rent each individual office out separately and then let people share the other services, just like a WeWork kind of a thing. This is a trend that I think has started with companies like WeWork and Industrious and others. And I think CB Richard Ellis just bought Industrious, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so we had this building, and we all of a sudden COVID, and our goal was we wanted to get at least 100% within 2 years. Well, almost by the end of the first year, we had it 80% leased, and COVID hit. And we're like, oh my goodness, we're gonna, people are gonna stop paying rent. They're gonna want to go home. They're not gonna want to work. What are we gonna do? This is a big investment for us. And we had one company that stopped paying their rent, and they were consultants to the restaurant industry, and all of their people just stopped paying them. And so I can understand that. Well, we went from 80% down to 75% leased. And then by the time COVID was over, we were 100% leased with a waiting list. We increased our monthly income by $3,000 a month. And I was just blown away by it. And that is because I believe this is a trend. People don't want to go into big, tall office buildings. They don't want large spaces. They want parking where they can walk right into the building. And they want the building close to rooftops. They want it to be close to their home. A quick hop over to the office. I'll meet a client there and I can be home in time, to make dinner, whatever. And that really proved it to me when we went from a negative to a positive and a waiting list all during COVID.
And we're going to take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by our sister company, Exeter Trust Company. Did you know that all individual retirement accounts are self-directed IRAs? It's because you choose where to put them. You choose whether to put your self-directed IRA at a bank or at a securities or brokerage firm or a life insurance company. So that makes it self-directed. But did you also know that all IRA custodians are not created equal? Most IRA custodians, like the banks, the securities firms, and the life insurance companies, limit you to publicly traded investments such as stocks and bonds and mutual funds. But some IRA custodians, like Exeter Trust Company, allow investors to invest their IRA funds in other alternative assets such as real estate. Investors can acquire real estate, mortgages, deeds of trust, or tax lien certificates inside the IRA as an investment inside the IRA. To learn more, call Exeter Trust Company at area code 307-222-8750 or visit them on the internet at exetertrustcompany.net.
Now let's expand upon commercial real estate in Illinois. Why should someone invest in Illinois real estate?
Just like when I was talking about DSTs, there's some really great things about DSTs, and there's some things that don't offer as much flexibility. It just depends on what your situation is. And I think that's true with each state that we talk about. So, for instance, California, I know Bill is out there, and, there's just so many cool things about California, and yet people are leaving California too. So why is that? Well, there's some things that aren't so cool about California too. And whether that has to do with population trends or whether that has to do with politics and all of that. And I think that's true of Illinois. And I know, Lauren, you're here in Illinois, up in Chicago area. And I went to school up there. I went, up in the collar counties, up in Bensenville. That's where I met my sweetheart, where my high school sweetheart was at Fenton up there. And so real familiar with that area. And we do a lot with Inland, and Inland is real involved in that market and one of the bigger holders of real estate in Illinois. So I would just say that there's a lot that Illinois has to offer. And one of the things that, it has a great appeal to me is there are certain communities that really do bode well in Illinois. And for instance, Champaign-Urbana, the campus of the University of Illinois. That's where my office is. And, it is a community that is growing, both in terms of its population, and it is growing both also in terms of its economy. And so, for instance, with regard to, and our University of Illinois just went over 50,000 students in enrollment for the first time ever in its history. So people want to be there, and people come from all over the world to be there. In fact, I think we're either the first or the second largest host of international students in the country. So a lot of those come from Asia and India and countries beyond. So there's a lot of pull, there's a lot of gravity, there's a lot of attraction to Illinois. But there in Champaign-Urbana, there's just a lot of really good opportunities, and I've seen, like I said earlier, I've brought people to town, and we've literally got a $500 million in projects that were built and are successful, and that people are really, really happy with. So, it just depends on what you're doing and where you want to be. But I also sit on the board of directors of AF Holdings, which is a manufacturing concern. We have 1,500 employees, 7 different manufacturing companies, and multiple states. But 5 of those manufacturing companies are right here in Illinois.
And you mentioned California. I think I could say for sure that California's politicians have lost their mind. That's probably the biggest reason for the California exodus. But any political issues or trends that you see affecting the Illinois real estate? Any political issues there that might be creating some issues or trends?
Well, taxation is, it's really a tough one, because I have had some people, say, hey, we're just not going to invest in Illinois because of the taxes. And so we're working with our governor and working with our political leaders to mitigate some of that. And some communities, for instance, Urbana, as an example, they have a thing where, you don't, if you buy or build a house in Urbana, you don't really pay a tax bill for 5 years as an incentive, to bring people to town. And so, so they can overcome that with some of their programs. And I give you an example how this works with an investor I was talking with the other day. We've got a fella that was developing a subdivision. It's beautiful. It's got 4 lakes. It's got parks. It's got, streets, roads, sidewalks, trees, everything. But he died and he left it to his boys. And the boys don't really want to develop. They're not developers. And so there's 60 lots left out there. And one of the things that I was talking to through one of these groups that we like to network with is a national group that comes in and they build rental stock in upscale communities for doctors, for young professionals and things like that. This is not your typical rental house. They build some really nice houses. And I said, guys, why don't you come to Illinois? Well, we don't want to come because of the taxes. I said, well, in this community, we can buy you 60 lots and you won't pay taxes for 5 years on those houses. And so, those kinds of things, you can get creative as a community. You can get creative, and work with the situation as it is and still make things happen.
That 5 year not having to pay taxes is huge. So I might be moving soon.
Huge. Yeah,
That's huge. Yeah.
it is.
Being a counselor, being in the industry for, so many years, working on so many different asset classes, what is one piece of advice that you would give real estate investors today?
Well, I would say it all boils down to DD, two letters, or maybe 3. Do your due diligence. Okay. And in the real estate industry, due diligence is really roughly translated your homework. Basically, do your homework. And I was talking to a fellow the other day and actually he had he had bought a property sight unseen, which I never recommend that. Every time I've ever heard of that, and mostly it's these people from California, they buy stuff sight unseen, and then they come out a year after they own it, and they said, "I bought that," and yeah, and then you get there and you look at it and you say, "Oh my, this isn't what they told me it was." So do your due diligence, go look at the properties, check into the comparable data, that kind of a thing. If you're working with a professional in the brokerage side, they're going to help you. I know certainly on the DST side, we only work with some of the top sponsors, and they have huge people on their staff to do the due diligence, and it's checked and it's cross-checked. The DSTs, it's a little easier, but there's no guarantee. You got to do your own homework, read the prospectuses and all of that kind of a thing. So that's the number one thing I would. But I think buy is the second thing I would say, because right now, real estate is, there's a flight to quality, and real estate is a quality investment. It really is. And I don't know, I'm no economist, but I get the feeling that the way the government is printing money, I heard somebody said the other day that more money has been printed in the history of the United States in the last 5 years than we've ever printed in the history of the country. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there's probably going to be inflation in the coming years. So hedges against inflation are probably, I mean, this is one man's opinion. I'm not trying to give anybody investment advice on a Skype call, but I think we can think that maybe there's going to be some inflation in the future, and real estate's a great hedge against inflation. So that's the second thing I would say is buy real estate. I know I'm prejudiced, but do your homework and then buy.
So to kind of wrap up our call here, wanted to ask a couple more personal questions. What do you like to do for fun, or what is something that you're passionate about outside of work?
Well, I'm real passionate about family and that kind of thing. I have 5 children. Bill's met some of the kids, and I have 15 grandchildren. And so real passionate about that. We do a thing called Cousins Camp every year where the grandkids all come to our place for a week, and we're getting ready for that this summer, and real kind of excited about that. I like to do a lot of things. I mean, we're leaving for Florida. We're going to take we've all been vaccinated now, and so we're going to be taking a trip to Florida to do scuba diving, like we were talking about earlier. Bill and I are both certified scuba divers, and so we're going to West Palm to do that. I write poetry. Every day, and I post it on Snapchat to the grandkids. Just a little uplifting thought, that kind of thing. I play music. I play guitar. I play piano. I write songs. I mean, I could go on. It's pretty boring, but I try to keep myself engaged.
That's awesome. Now, with 5 kids and 15 grandkids, who keeps who out of trouble?
We're all in trouble all the time. It's usually not bad trouble, although that happens on occasion too. But it's usually good trouble. But everybody seems to get a little overwhelmed, and we have a good time.
So that's perfect. Well, we appreciate having you on the show today. And how can listeners get in touch with you for some of that quality advice and one-to-one counseling?
Sure. Well, I just a direct call would be great. My number is 217-841-4382. And I'd be happy to chat with them.
Well, great. Thank you so much again for being on our podcast. That was a lot of great information. We really appreciate that. And for the listeners, thank you for listening to Go Ahead Ask podcast today. Our next episode is going to be unraveling the mystery of California Proposition 19. Now that we've been talking about the California politicians have lost their mind, the voters were certainly misled. really by what Proposition 19 really was. And so they voted it in, but probably now wish they hadn't. So we're going to interview Jordan Marks, who's an attorney and taxpayer advocate with the San Diego County Recorder's Assessor's Office. So tune in next time for California Proposition 19. Don't forget, we always encourage questions on Go Ahead Ask. So email your questions or your topics, or even if you want to appear on Go Ahead Ask, to ask@exeterco.com. You can also call us at area code 619-239-3091. And if you love our podcast, please like it, subscribe to it, share it, and comment on it. We always track the comments and we will respond. So if you have questions for any of us that were on the podcast today, go ahead and post those. We'd be happy to respond. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Go Ahead Ask with the Exeter Group. Join us for our next episode when we further unravel the mysteries of real estate.